Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Arsenal are in advanced talks to sign Sporting striker Viktor Gyokeres. So what could the Swede offer Mikel Arteta's side? And is he the missing piece in the title puzzle for the Gunners? Before we get into this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and also leave us a cheeky comment as well. Now, joining me today is our football correspondent, David Ornstein, and the Athletic's Anka, who I've heard is a big fan of rather big and lanky strikers. You can correct me if I'm wrong in a second, Carl. But David, let's get into this. You reported on the Athletic yesterday that Gyokeres to Arsenal isn't done quite yet, but we are nearing a conclusion to the Arsenal striker search. Talk to us. Where are we now with this deal? And is there a fee already in play to sign Gyokeres?
Potentially. At the time of the recording, it's not there yet, and they've got work to do. But as we and many others reported on Sunday, Arsenal are in advanced talks with Sporting Lisbon to sign Viktor Gyokeres. They do actually have personal terms in place on a 5-year contract, and the player is extremely determined to join Arsenal. Mikel Arteta, as manager, understandably wants this wrapped up as quickly as possible with pre-season training getting underway. And so we'll have to see if the clubs can find a common ground on a transfer fee. Right now, I don't know that to have happened. There are some suggestions on social media that it has, but that's not my information right now. That's not to say it won't change in the next minutes and hours and days, because it's a situation that's being worked upon. The wider situation is the search for a number 9 at Arsenal. It's been the talk of the industry, of the club, of that fan base, and all of us. And Arsenal have looked at many options over a considerable period of time. We've talked about Benjamin Sesko, and we'll speak about him more. We've talked about Ollie Watkins, we'll speak about him more. We actually broke news in late March on The Athletic that Viktor Gyokeres is expected to be high in Arsenal's thinking for this piece of recruitment, for the specific position, and that Andrea Berta, who was then their new sporting director, is a massive fan of his. And that's ultimately the way they've decided to go at the end of a very long, intricate, detailed, nuanced process that took them in different directions and has had many sort of bumps in the road and twists and turns. And it's not finished yet. But right now, this is the direction of travel, and we'll see how it concludes.
Yeah, Carl, the numbers speak for themselves, and we'll talk about whether or not his style suits Arsenal a little later on. But look, 97 goals in 102 games for Sporting. You're a fan of big, lanky strikers. Are you a fan of Viktor Gyokeres?
Yes. So obviously, most of my knowledge of Viktor has come because of his links to Sporting and to Manchester United. So Arsenal, the only club looking for a striker. So most of my research initially came from seeing whether or not he'd fit in at Manchester United. The best way I can explain Viktor Gyokeres is, if you're an Arsenal fan, you may remember partway through last season, Ian Wright messaged saying, "We need a killer." The good thing about Viktor Gyokeres is he plays football like he's a bully. Right. So this is a striker where if he seizes upon a physical advantage he has over a defender, he will exploit that again and again and again and again and again until either that defender learns to adjust or until the defender just crumbles and has a horrible day. That's the good thing about him. The interesting thing about him is he plays football like he's a bully. So when he does have that advantage, he's just wreaking havoc in the Portuguese league, particularly against the bottom half clubs. The question I think quite a few clubs, not just the Premier League clubs, but also clubs around Europe is going, is he still going to be a bully when he makes the move into one of Europe's top 5 leagues again for one of the bigger clubs in Europe? I think he will. I think he's a good football player. This one is really interesting to me.
Everything people speak about when it comes to Gyokeres, no one speaks about his headering of the ball. I've looked at the stats, and they're not that high. Arsenal are a team that love set pieces. Should they be worried here?
It's an asterisk. It's a very important footnote for a striker of his size. I think he's advertised at being 6'2". Sometimes he looks like he'd be 6'3". We could talk about.
Is that wide or high? I mean, he's huge.
Yeah. He's a big boy.
Yeah.
And for a striker of his size, you would be expecting him to score more headed goals. He does not, which is interesting. I'm not going to say concerning. It is a footnote, and it's one of those things of I've not seen him do this enough, and I don't know if this is a tactical choice from Sporting CP. I mean, Sporting do love a underlapping run and a pullback. A lot of goals he scored in Portugal have come from him running the channels and just being bigger, stronger, faster down that half space, cutting inside, getting onto his stronger foot, and then shooting. Right. This is a striker whose determination in and around the final third can turn a half chance into a goal because he's just going to brute force his way in there, and that's really good. And then, but also, why aren't you scoring more headers? Is that a directive? I'd say don't bank on him scoring 5 to 10 headed goals, but also the movement he is going to generate in and around the 6-yard box in particular. I think there are 2 or 3 crosses last season from Arsenal, particularly in those tricky games against teams that sit in a compact sort of middle block. So you're thinking about teams in what you can only describe the Premier League middle class, that middle class that's getting stronger and more combative. But there are times, particularly when, let's say, you're playing Fulham at home, Fulham's centre-backs aren't really going to leave their penalty area. They don't want to. And it's going to be Gyokeres and his movement. Can he get onto the end of those low crosses, which I think he should be able to do. And that should hopefully help Arsenal take on some of the more frustrating opponents they've had last season.
We've heard about what Gyokeres potentially could bring to Arsenal, David. I'm just thinking about the other names you mentioned at the top, Benjamin Sesko, Ollie Watkins. I mean, what's the latest on those conversations? But also, I don't know, like this has been the topic for, I'd say, the last year or so or two, as who Arsenal will bring in as a number 9. How concrete are those interests in those players?
Yeah, they've done a huge amount of work on alternative options, all of their options, including Gyokeres, but perhaps the most was done on Benjamin Sesko over years. And that was really the feeling that we got from the club for a long time, especially that their recruitment department was keen to bring him in. Clearly an amazing talent with quality now and huge potential for the future. And some think he's going to be one of the best number 9s around. And it's no surprise that Arsenal and many other clubs have been looking at him. I don't know if anyone's going for him right now, and that raises questions in its own right. Maybe it's the finances involved with the sort of transfer fee expected of RB Leipzig and the salary requests and so on for this level of player. But clearly there seemed to be some sort of shift around the time Andrea Berta came in. And we've mentioned that he is a big fan of Viktor Gyokeres. But I don't think he ever left the picture for Arsenal. It was one that they were exploring alongside Gyokeres and maybe even the likes of Watkins at the same time, and kind of bringing them all up to a certain point and deciding which one makes most financial sense to go for. And let's see if it twists yet again before the end of this. We don't have reason to think so right now, but you just never know until the ink is dry in these situations. But we don't know of anything advancing with Sesko just yet. And actually on The Athletic, I think we were very responsible in our reporting, because although there was a lot of noise about Arsenal advancing on Sesko, we never had that sort of concrete information to suggest they were. And it was about being patient and seeing what road they decided to take. In the meantime, yeah, they went for Ollie Watkins in January. They would have done the deal if it was at the right financial level. Aston Villa wanted around £60 million. There was no compromise on that. That was the possibility that they were kind of presenting because they needed to sell one of their strikers. Arsenal, I think, were willing to go around £45 million. It wasn't a negotiation. Villa said 60 or nothing. And so in the end, Arsenal said, we're not going to 60. And Villa said, okay, we'll go and sell John Duran. And Villa kept Ollie Watkins. And now we're on a few months. I don't suspect that Villa's asking price is hugely lower. And maybe it comes down a little bit in the passage of a small amount of time. But Ollie Watkins is a top Premier League ready striker, England international. Yeah, he's at a slightly older age, but his numbers speak for themselves. His body is in amazing condition. He's a brilliant lad. He's being looked at by a number of clubs because there are not many players like him. And I'm sure Arsenal will remain attentive to that situation until and unless something else gets completed. Arsenal, in my view, they've just needed the finishing touch. And I know that's a really simplistic thing to say, but they had by far and away the highest XG in the Champions League semi-finals, a semi-final roster that included PSG, Barcelona and Inter Milan. They should really have won. I was in the Parc des Princes for the second leg against PSG, and the chances that they had, they really should have gone on to the final. And they were clear-cut, gilt-edged chances, many of them. And Gyokeres, from people I speak to in Portugal and around the game who know far more about this sort of stuff than me, and don't really have a skin in the game or a dog in the fight. They're kind of impartial observers, but have studied this player very closely, and others too. A couple of things that they say immediately. They say, his volume may come down in somewhere like the Premier League, but if you're still contributing, say, 15 to 20, down from 50 plus, then that's a return that could be absolutely critical to Arsenal, especially because they appear to have pretty much everything else in place in terms of chance creation and different positions that have been filled and are still being filled this summer. It really was that number 9, that finisher. I don't want to remind older Arsenal fans of the phrase "fox in the box," Francis Jeffers. So there's no guarantee, but a number 9, a top number 9 would fit that nicely. And Gyokeres has experience of English football through Coventry, and he's done it quite a different way to many. But there's nothing to say if Arsenal get this over the line that it won't be a great success. And equally, look at the price point that is being talked about here. We don't have final figures yet, but Sporting Lisbon seem to want a set fee of a fixed guaranteed of 70 million euros and then some add-ons so that they can say they touch the 80 million mark. I don't know if some of those add-ons will be realistic and then some not so realistic, but they want to somehow touch 80 million. Convert that into pounds. And in recent years, we've been talking about Harry Kane, but he's one of the best strikers in the Premier League and the world, of course, but going for in excess of 100 million euros and different players in different positions. Yeah, different age profiles, like a Declan Rice in excess of 100 million pounds. Moises Caicedo. You've seen this summer with Florian Wirtz. There are midfielders who have been going. Martín Zubimendi into Arsenal is 65 million euros. And all over the pitch, you're seeing, like in recent years, fees for 70s, 80s, 90s million pounds. When you actually look at this for the productivity of a Gyokeres, and it hasn't been tested in the Premier League yet, I actually think it would be really good value for money. And that's one of the things we said. And forgive me for not mentioning this name earlier, but the initial target for Arsenal in terms of Mikel Arteta specifically was Alexander Isak. That was kind of his dream scenario. Well, that would have been going into the 150 territory, people have been saying 130, 140, whatever. And so when you look at it like that and you look at this potential figure, we did report in that piece in late March when we spoke of Arsenal's interest being high in Viktor Gyokeres, that perhaps presents the best value for money option on the market. And if they get it and the numbers are suitable, I think they'll be delighted.
Yeah, I mean, Carl, everything's a gamble. Someone might be prolific somewhere, there might not be somewhere else. But I can't help but think, a player with that output at the age of 27 coming to Arsenal, he isn't a project striker. This screams a bit of Robin van Persie coming to Manchester United off a hot season and then winning the Premier League. Is there a possibility here? That's all I'm saying.
Wow, you invoked Robin van Persie's name. Wow. Okay. All right. Let's take this apart piece by piece. So, most of my knowledge of Viktor Gyokeres was done in terms of researching how he fit at Manchester United, in amongst all the stuff that you can find on The Athletic from our wonderful team of Arsenal writers. There is a fantastic Arsenal writer who is outside the Athletic ecosystem. I should also recommend, it's Billy Carpenter. He runs a great Substack called Edu's Barbecue. You should check that out because Manchester United are playing Arsenal in the first game of the Premier League season. So I have to do loads of opposition scouting as well. So Billy's someone I like to read about Arsenal because I want to find out where I can hurt Arsenal. Or where do Manchester United need to hurt Arsenal? And something Mr. Carpenter wrote quite a while ago was how Arsenal's goal is to create situations where Saka is marked like Phil Foden. If you can create 30 seconds where Saka is marked, has the same sort of marking system like Phil Foden, then you can see how good Saka is. So you look at this Arsenal team, they have a huge right-sided tilt. Saka on the right wing, you've got Ben White when he's in good form there. You've got Odegaard, dovetail, and that trio, that pod, that is where all the good stuff happens currently, or the majority of the good stuff happens currently. And Saka is, I mean, go on The Athletic and read Philip Lahm's article about how you defend against wingers in the Champions League semi-finals and the things Philip Lahm is saying about stopping Saka. Right there, I have routinely seen Saka playing for England or playing for Arsenal, and he is being double teamed, if not triple teamed, where the entire defense is just moving all the way over to try and stop him. Now, when that happens, if you're a manager, that's a good and a bad problem. Now, Pep Guardiola's big thing, and a thing he's spoken about for years, and a thing that Louis van Gaal and Johan Cruyff has also said is, if you get a situation where the entire defense is shifting all the way over to one side, then the opposition for a quick switch and scoring a goal quickly on the other side opens up massively. But to do that, Arsenal need to figure out who they've got at number 9 as a reference point and who they got on the left side of the situation. And I think this is also why David is going to tell us a lot about the Martinelli situation sometime in the near future, because that left-sided situation needs to get reworked. Gyokeres helps because he's a great reference point up front. His hold-up play, the way he just uses that frame when he's got his back to goal and just shrugging off centre-backs. Okay, yep, mileage may vary on whether or not you think Portuguese defenders are good or not. But from what you've also seen in the Champions League games as well, especially 2 or 3 games against English opposition, he can wrestle, he can tussle. You know, this is a striker that has played against Saliba and against Gabriel. And okay, those 2 centre-backs showed him what the very best in the Premier League can offer, but he went for it. And I think that's interesting there. I think the fact that he's able to run the channels and is able to get on his, one thing that's going to stick out a lot if he does arrive at Arsenal is in the situations where Arsenal win the ball high up the field, or if there's a loose ball and the ball is spilling and you're like, oh, Arsenal have the opportunity to attack, you will see Gyokeres on his bike. And I'm talking, that boy runs and he's going to demand the ball. He is very, very pleasing. Give me the ball, I'm going to make something happen. Or the ball's been spilled and he's going, Martin, up top now, you can see the run. That sort of things will help. And I think Arsenal are approaching a critical mass of attacking players. It's getting to a really, really interesting situation where we know they can absolutely tussle with the best teams. We know that their on-ball structure and off-ball structure is built for going up against a Real Madrid or going up against a PSG now, and they don't blink. The problem is, what do you do when you're playing David Moyes' Everton in that brand new stadium and Moyes is going, I'm just going to put 5 men behind the ball at all times? How do you generate that space for Gyokeres to run into? How can Gyokeres have a battle with the likes of Tarkowski or Keane and nudge ahead of them when the ball is being delivered around the 6-yard box? Saka is phenomenal. Odegaard hopefully will have recovered from his ankle injury and will be feeling better. And it's getting better. And I'm certainly preparing. I've made peace with the fact that Arsenal may one day win the Premier League title. The more I'm talking about it and the more I talk about Gyokeres, the more I realise he's going to score at Old Trafford on match day 1, and he's going to do the celebration in my face, isn't he?
Just letting you know, not the Gabrielle one, but the actual real one. Anyway.
This one's going to go. That's going to go triple platinum. That's going triple platinum in North London.
How we both did it together at the same time. Actual jokes. But David, we have to have a little chat on Andrea Berta, and obviously there'll be natural comparisons made to Adey or not any differences, perhaps. But the reality is, like, this is a crucial transfer window for Arsenal. The Zubimendi deal was interesting, but I think that was prior to him to a certain degree. Obviously, a striker, a new keeper. How would you measure his influence on this transfer window so far?
Well, you said crucial transfer window. Everyone is crucial at Arsenal, and we say this every year and twice a year. It does feel particularly pertinent given the sort of lack of trophies since the 2020 FA Cup, and this sense of external pressure building on Mikel Arteta to deliver, which I don't think is replicated internally. I think they're very satisfied with the progress that he's brought, and it is really tangible progress in my view. But of course, with Berta new in the door, he'll want to be making his mark. And yeah, he does do things differently from what we've seen. I've got to preface this with, these are extremely early days. You judge a sporting director over years. And that was a frustration that Eddie Howe pointed out about Dan Ashworth's departure when he was asked in a press conference, like, how do you assess his time? And he's like, it's hard for me to judge. We should be, determining that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. And it's not just on the pitch, and it's not just first team, and it's not just recruitment. It's off the pitch, and it's academy and women's and the whole sort of broader spectrum. Now, I do think Andrea Berta will be focused mainly on first team matters, and you've seen news that James McNicholas reported on The Athletic about Arsenal promoting James Ellis to become technical director. Obviously, Jason Ato left, so they'll clearly be delegating responsibilities in different ways. And Berta is renowned in the industry for working the market, being a bit of a trader, and he has come to Arsenal with a very strong reputation on the whole from his time at Atletico Madrid most prominently, but people who've worked with him from even earlier in Italy, and he came from a different background. It wasn't in football, was it? And so, yeah, of course, his methods will not be the same as somebody like Edu before, who seemed from the outside to go quite clearly for his defined target. And if they didn't get that target, which happened on quite a few occasions, you remember Lisandro Martinez was their top choice for that sort of left back stroke left centre back role. He went to Manchester United. They pivoted to Alexander Zinchenko. I'm not sure on Timber. I can't remember. There were a few examples at the time. There was a striker, I think in the January, Vlahovic. They didn't sign a striker. They ended up going for Gabriel Jesus. And there'll be many more instances. Whereas Berta seems to be juggling multiple options at the same time, spinning plates and manoeuvring, keeping conversations warm, such as right now, say like an Ollie Watkins at the same time as you're pursuing your Viktor Gyokeres in recent weeks. The impression we got from the outside was that Edu was very collegiate in his approach with his deputy, Jason Ato, and others within the club. And maybe Andrea Berta, possibly because it's early, he's come from a completely different background. He doesn't know the guys inside the club yet. Seems to be doing things sort of in his own way so far. And maybe it's a bit soon to start forming all of your internal bonds in the middle of a transfer window. So, James King is there, who's heavily involved in the recruitment and contracts and the talks that are taking place. And then in time, let's see how he beds in, rather than sort of judging it just now. And yeah, it's different views who you speak to in different parts of the industry. Some speak really highly of Andrea Berta and what he's done and what he's capable of doing and how he sort of maneuvers his way through talks, negotiations, that he's very skilled. Others less complimentary or don't know him so well and it's a bit more intrigue and mystery. Really it will take a more prolonged period for us to be able to sort of form firm judgments. And the proof will be in the pudding. I hate to say it, but when that window closes, so far Arsenal have made a start that sees them bringing Kepa. Seems a good choice for second goalkeeper. But they've paid for him £5 million release clause, another Chelsea deal. So, there's some pleased, some a bit like, oh, not another. And then you've got Christian Norgard is coming in from Brentford. Feels like a shrewd move with midfield departures that we've seen. They've announced the Martín Zubimendi deal, and that warrants great excitement, I'm sure. He's a top midfielder, Spain international. We've seen what he can do, and I'm sure he has much more left in him. That wasn't really a Berta move, but clearly he was involved in getting it concluded. And then there's the big ones coming up in those crucial positions: the 9, the potential on the left, on the right, the 10-8, how he handles contract situations. So Ethan Wanyeri has come into the public domain in recent days. There's Bukayo Saka. There's William Saliba, and more. So it's one hell of an in tray for Andrea Berta, both in terms of internal relations, delivering on deals, and that will ultimately define Arsenal's success and whether they're able to compete. And they've competed in recent years, but now they need to go over the line, and that's not an easy task.
Now, before we touch on who else could be coming to Arsenal this summer, that big deal for Martín Zubimendi has been done. Go and read our colleague James McNicholas's Inside the Deal piece on The Athletic right now. But technically and tactically, Carl, what do you make of this player coming to Arsenal?
Oh, he's the guy. Like, this is the one. Best way I can put it. I was one of many England fans watching the Euro 2022 final, going at halftime, Rodri's out, Rodri's out, Rodri's out, we got a chance. And then Zubimendi walked in. That was that, right? 92% pass completion, one possession multiple times. I think it's him snatching the ball off Bellingham. That begins begins a sequence of events that leads to Spain getting a goal. This is a player who was being courted by Barcelona, and during this courtship, they were calling him possibly the great successor to Busquets. Right? This is a football player that Liverpool attempted to throw the bag at to acquire, only for Zubi to say actually he'd much rather have one more season playing football in San Sebastian, which is fine because playing football in San Sebastian
it's not the worst thing in the world.
It's like the best place to play football. This is a football player who I deeply admire. I really enjoy watching him play football. He's a football player who very often, when I have to come up with, because I'm right about Manchester United most of the time, very often I have to write, here's who Manchester United should buy, and like, who could fit at Manchester United at defensive midfield. I never put Zubimendi in these lists, not because I don't think he's good enough to do it for Manchester United. He absolutely is, but because he's just out of Manchester United's tax bracket at the moment, right? This is a football player who should be going for 100 million. This is a 100 million football player. He's the ability he has playing as the single pivot in a defensive system. This is a role that is kind of slowly walking away from Premier League football, because the Premier League now is getting so fast, so strong, so combative that you're only having a second and a half on the ball. And yet I've seen him pick the ball, drop deep, pick the ball up with centre backs, turn someone, carry it forward with consummate ease. He is brilliant. And I think if you are an Arsenal fan who really like the partnership between Rice and Jorginho, this is an attempt to replicate that partnership, give you an extra bit of mobility, and then some. He's spooky good.
Another player that we've mentioned, David, is Noni Madueke. Is he spooky good, or is he? How close are Arsenal to that agreement? Because we've mentioned and reported on The Athletic that personal terms have been agreed, but nothing from club to club yet.
Well, spooky good will be seen in time. He's clearly a really talented player. He's broken into the England squad. He's just 23 years old. When he's been fit, by and large, he's excelled for Chelsea, and he's got really high level, evidently. Otherwise, Arsenal wouldn't be interested in signing him. They are interested because they've long been looking for backup for Bukayo Saka, and competition, you could say, depth, especially with the injury he suffered last season. And with Ethan Nwaneri, he is being more identified as more a central role, sort of 8-10 competition backup Martin Odegaard rather than to the right. Madueke can play on the right. He can also play on the left, and it remains to be seen if and what Arsenal will do in that position, and it may depend on departures. So it's a plausible opportunity to explore, and they've managed to get personal terms in place. I never thought that would be the difficult element. They need to sort of strike a deal club to club if they're going to make this happen, and they haven't had the direct contacts yet. Let's see if and when that materialises, and if and when Arsenal are prepared to go to the sort of fee that Chelsea would want. So he's clearly enthusiastic about the move. if it was to develop, but he's focused on the Club World Cup at the moment. So I don't think it's probably, and he's playing well out there. It's probably not dominating his thoughts. And Arsenal will equally have some other options as well. As we mentioned previously, they had Brian Mbeumo as one they explored before this. Clearly there's a decent relationship between the clubs because they're doing quite a lot of trading now. And let's see how this one develops.
We've spoken a lot about incomings, but I mean, what about outgoings? There's players like Martinelli that have been spoken about that potentially could leave. What happens to Trossard if they get another wide player in? Talk to us, David. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it's quite fluid. Look, they're weighing up multiple possibilities, and that's just standard practice. So the 9 situation is pretty evident. They want to bring someone in. Gabriel Jesus is still out injured. They've got their existing options such as Kai Havertz. We don't know exactly where he'd be playing. That one doesn't take a lot of explaining. The left is a bit more intricate. Obviously, Gabriel Martinelli is a fine player. Like, some respect on his name, and what you saw him do in the Bernabeu and on many occasions. Of course, people would want to see it more, not least him. But let's remember that. And if he stays, then I'm sure he'll grow into an even better player. And he plays for Brazil. It's no disrespect, but clearly, if you're going to bring in somebody of Rodrigo stature or Anthony Gordon or any of the other names that have been linked, then there probably isn't space for 2 such players. And so that's why there might be a possibility of a Martinelli departure. But I've got to make clear, I don't know of any movements or talks or developing situations. You hear stuff about Saudi Arabia, you hear stuff about Bayern Munich. I'm sure he's liked and admired everywhere, but that doesn't mean a move is materialising, and we'll report as and when any situation changes on that. Look, clearly inside Arsenal, there's massive admiration for Rodrigo in certain quarters. I don't know if that's universal, so we continue to make our checks, and I don't know of that developing. So there have been suggestions that he's prioritising Arsenal. I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear that players want to come to them, but it's not like the clubs are talking, to our knowledge. Maybe there's been some interaction with his camp, which is normal. You find out conditions, you express an interest, and so on. Similar Anthony Gordon, the price would be extremely high if he was to be lured away from Newcastle to any club. He's just a player that Arsenal like, and we've said that for a long time. So yeah, we'll see on that. Then you mentioned Trossard. There've been talks to sort of improve his contract, and we don't know of them not happening anymore. So maybe that's Arsenal's focus. Maybe if a great offer came in for them and him, remember he needs to agree to a departure if he's going to go. Then we'll see. But that doesn't seem to have developed either. It's been more of whether he's going to renew or not. And there's a similar situation, of course, with Ethan Nwaneri, an amazing talent, academy product who we understand wants to stay at Arsenal. But that doesn't always mean it's a foregone conclusion, because you've got to get the deal right. And his terms expire next summer. In one sense, they've got a long time, because, when he was moving from scholarship to pro, I don't think he signed until the very end, just before he was about to become a free agent, and he could have had his pick of clubs. But he wanted to stay. Eventually, they got the deal right. And so, on the one hand, yeah, clubs do get nervous when a player enters his last year, and many of them would prefer to sell than to let a player enter their final year. But as we've seen with Salah, Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, the players have the power in that position. You can't force them to go. You could tell them they're playing in the reserves or something like that. But are you really going to do that? Similar situation at Crystal Palace brewing with Mark Guéhi, their captain. Maybe he'll leave this summer, but maybe he'll stay and leave as a free agent in 12 months' time. The club might say, no chance, we'll never let that happen. But, they had a chance to sell him for 65 plus 5 million last summer to Newcastle. They didn't do it. Liverpool have shown some interest this summer. Whether that or something else materialises remains to be seen. But you can't force a player out. And he's their captain. He's their talismanic central defender who lifted the FA Cup and is a brilliant player for England as well. And so with Nwaneri, there's interest building in him. No surprise. Wouldn't you'd be more surprised if there wasn't. So it's clear that there's interest on the continent from Germany. It was reported by Mike McGrath in the Telegraph on Sunday. interest from Chelsea that's been reported by Fabrizio Romano and others. And there'll be tons of suitors for him if he was to become available. But right now, I think the focus is on the talks. Are they going to reach an agreement? Arsenal want to. He'll be keen to stay. Sorry, I've got a barky dog here. He'll be keen to stay.
It's Ethan Nwaneri. He wants him to stay, David. He wants him to stay. We get it.
The dog wants him to stay. So that's a situation where a bit of calmness is needed to see how this plays out, and respect for an 18-year-old boy who has barely had a summer off with international duties at various age group level. He's just been at the Euros with England in that successful campaign. When he comes back, I'm sure they'll hold talks and more talks and try and see whether they can go somewhere. If they can't and a move happens, and maybe that's why Arsenal are exploring some of these possibilities. Like Eze, for example. They've held talks with his camp. It's not gone club to club yet. He's in an 8 to 10 role. We've just said that they're looking at moving Nwaneri into an 8 to 10 role. So, it's just logical. There doesn't need to be hysteria about this. A player is into his last 12 months. It could happen that he leaves or somebody else leaves. And so you look at possibilities. It might well not happen and he stays and the players that they've been looking at don't come in. Just chill. And,
there, you had it. There it is. The master of the transfer window. The best transfer news report in the world is telling you
just chill.
Cheers,
David.
That's probably where I should exit.
Yeah, good times, man. We've squeezed you dry for Arsenal transfers. You've come up trumps as usual. Thank you so much for your time, and also to your dog. Nwaneri's staying. Don't worry, son. Don't worry.
Calm down, boy.
Carl, Noni Madueke. This was not a name I would have seen linked to Arsenal at any point, but I feel there's something in you that kind of likes this deal if it potentially happens.
I really like him. He's a football player I really enjoy. I really enjoyed watching him play in the Eredivisie. I was quite surprised that when Chelsea got the deal done for him, they took him immediately in January rather than loan him back to complete the season. I know PSV were a little bit miffed about that. I think they would have liked to keep him and try and get to the title race there. But he's an excellent football player. I know Enzo Maresca has been quite vocal in his criticisms of him, but I think that's because he knows how much talent is there as a football player. So he's already brought up his inconsistent work rate off the ball, which Noni has admitted he needs to get better at defending, and he is getting better. I think he's getting really good at curving his runs. But in 1v1s, he is a very, very fun, I'm going to take the ball out, drag it to the touchline, and then I'm going to make your life hell to a fullback. He can pass, shoot, carry off either foot, and I can absolutely see why, following a season where Arsenal have lost 3 really important players to the injuries they have, when you've had multiple hamstring injuries that required surgery as well, you may want to get very good quality players who can share playing time or playing space. I think the attacking threat of Madueke compared to the attacking threat of Saka, they're different in attacking quality, but they're also different in how they go about their jobs as well, which I think opens up really interesting tactical combinations that I'm sure Arteta's already thinking about, where you've got Saka playing for the better part of an hour, trying to do one thing, and then once the defence gets a little bit too comfortable doing that sort of triple team and sitting deep, Madueke comes on and he's trying to stretch you in a really wide position there. I think my sort of hot take is, of the teams that finished in the top 6 last season, I think Madueke is probably the attacking player who's most likely to have a notable improved, like a goal glut or an assist glut next season. I really like him. I think his playing partnership with Cole Palmer is super fun. If you are a citizen of the city of Wolverhampton, I can understand why you don't like him.
I will ask you though, especially from someone from the outside looking in, where Arsenal perhaps have struggled over the years is lack of competition, especially in attacking areas. If Madueke does come to Arsenal, is that adequate competition for Saka? Or is that more of a tactical, as you said earlier, much more of a tactical signing, which means it's much more of a cohesive team buy, as opposed to this is the guy that might oust Bukayo Saka from his position?
I think it's both. Look, I'm never gonna bet against Saka. I think that's a very silly thing you can ever do. That is that guy is Ian Robin's nephew somehow.
A few generations down and
Yeah,
culturally.
yeah. Remember, there was a game. Arsenal came to Old Trafford, start the 22-23 season. United won that game, but Arsenal were playing in all black, and it was the first time I'd seen Saka sort of post-gym transformation. So a lot of my early introduction with Saka was through the England team. 77 Saka was one size, and then seeing him in 2022, you're like, oh, you've been in the gym. And then what he did to United that day, I went, oh, you're putting it all together now. And I think Saka will remain the number one choice on the right wing, because basically he's the number one choice on the right wing in the Premier League. It's him and Mo Salah, and you can flip a coin, or you can. I'm not getting that barbershop argument, but you can do that. But I do also think the amount of times I've seen Saka come off a disappointing Arsenal performance, and he is exhausted. If Arsenal aren't winning games, it's not because Saka isn't putting in the effort. Sometimes it might be because Saka's put in so much effort the week before that he's exhausted. And I think Madueke is a player now that Saka doesn't necessarily have to completely exhaust himself for 90 minutes in games, because there are times that you can bring in a different option. Definitely, absolutely. Still questions over what needs to occur on that left-hand side. Left-back situation is a rotating cast. You can tell me how things much rather work there. But I think the interesting thing for me, looking at Arsenal, and again, this is the outside looking in, Arsenal fans can tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Arteta is building the spine for two different type of Arsenal teams. So you've got Declan Rice in games against the bigger teams can play more as a number 6 because he's tremendous at counter-attacking and stopping counter-attacks. We saw the 4v1 against Liverpool. But in games where Arsenal are going to get between 50 and 60, maybe more possession, it may be better to move Declan Rice from the number 6, put him in a more box-to-box role where he can carry the ball, and then you have a better progressive passer there. That's been solved now by getting in Zubimendi, because that's your 6 now. That means Rice can play more as that box-to-box player, but then you can swap. And I think that's what's also happening with other selections around Arteta's team, is that you've sorted out starting 11 when you're playing away, when you're playing at Anfield. That's done. You've sorted that out. It's now, what are you going to do when you go to the G-Tech? What are you going to do when you're at Craven Cottage? What are you going to do when you're up against the recently promoted Sunderland that are going to dig deep?
Okay. Top stuff. Thanks for your contribution on the pod, Carl. And also, David, thanks for joining us as well. In other news, former Arsenal midfielder Thomas Partey has been charged with 5 counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault. He denies all charges. An Arsenal statement to The Athletic said the player's contract ended on the 30th of June. Due to ongoing legal proceedings, the club is unable to comment on the case. He will, of course, appear in court on August the 5th. Thank you guys for listening. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anka, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcast from.